If you want to know why massive blockbuster franchise, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, are just currently struggling to keep you awake in the theater, you actually need to look back at a 2005 Nickelodeon cartoon.
Right.
Yeah, a cartoon about a bald kid with like an arrow tattooed on his head. I mean, think about it for a second. Have you ever loved a show or a book series or a massive movie franchise? And, you were totally invested in the beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, the hero is just trying to save their neighborhood. Right. Or maybe they are just trying to rescue a single friend.
The stakes are super grounded.
Exactly. The stakes are entirely grounded and you genuinely care about the survival of Bull. But then you fast forward to the fifth or sixth sequel, and suddenly those same street-level heroes are flying through alternate dimensions.
Yeah, shooting laser beams out of their hands.
Fighting literal capital G gods in outer space. And instead of sitting on the edge of your seat, you were just sitting there in the dark, staring at the screen, feeling completely exhausted.
Totally drained.
Like, the spectacle has gotten so astronomically big that it somehow means absolutely nothing.
It is a profound, incredibly specific sort of narrative fatigue. I mean, the screen is filled with world-ending explosions, entire cities are being leveled by CGI shockwaves, and yet...
You feel nothing.
Exactly. As a viewer, you feel completely emotionally detached. You're just watching pixels collide, basically.
Numb. You are just completely numb to it.
Well, that overwhelming feeling of exhaustion is not just you getting older, and it's not you becoming a cranky moviegoer.
No, it's actually a diagnosed structural failure in storytelling.
Yeah. And today, for this deep dive, our mission is to explore exactly how one specific piece of media managed to look at that exact failure, deconstruct it, and, well, completely cure it.
And we're pulling from an absolutely brilliant video essay by the YouTube channel Nowhere to Land.
Right. The video is titled When a Show Solves the Power Problem. And the subject of this extensive analysis is the animated series Avatar, The Last Airbender.
Which is just a fascinating case study. It really is. We are looking at how this specific show dismantled the traditional tired tropes of power in fiction to create a structural blueprint for long-form storytelling.
Okay, let's unpack this.
And we really do need to unpack it carefully, layer by layer, because it is crucial to establish right up front, especially for anyone listening who might not be familiar with the property, that we aren't just talking about a Saturday morning cartoon here.
Right.
When we look at the source material we are dissecting today, we are actually looking at a masterclass in architectural narrative.
Oh, for sure.
We're looking at a blueprint for how to construct a story that genuinely, structurally grows up alongside the person watching it, rather than just relying on the crutch of, escalating the pyrotechnics every season.
Wait, before we dive into how they solved this massive power problem that plagues Hollywood, we have to talk about how this show almost didn't exist at all.
Oh, pitch process.
Yeah, because looking at the notes here, the very origin of the show completely dictated the weird, brilliant structure they ended up using. Let's set the scene. It is the early 2000s.
A very different media landscape.
Totally. Look at the network. Nickelodeon, a network primarily known for SpongeBob SquarePants and episodic comedy, is suddenly looking around and desperately searching for their own massive world-building mega hit.
They wanted a piece of that massive fantasy pie.
Exactly. They wanted their own Harry Potter. They wanted their own Lord of the Rings. They put out a mandate for a sprawling epic.
Which is an incredibly daunting mandate for any television creator, let alone in the realm of Western children's animation at the time.
Seriously?
The video essay details how the two creators of Avatar originally went into the network executives to pitch a totally different concept.
Oh, right. It wasn't fantasy at all at first.
No, not at all. They didn't pitch a sprawling fantasy war. They pitched an animated slice-of-life, coming-of-age story that was heavily based on their own personal experiences and misadventures.
Which is cute, but,
Right. Perhaps unsurprisingly, for a network that was aggressively hunting for the next Hogwarts or Middle-earth, that initial grounded pitch completely failed.
Yeah, because a slice-of-life animated show about the creators' lives just doesn't exactly scream global merchandising phenomenon to an executive sitting in a boardroom.
Not even a little bit.
So the creators are forced to go back to the drawing board. And the successful second pitch, the one that actually got the green light and the funding, leaned heavily, like almost suspiciously heavily, into exactly what the network was searching for.
They essentially pitched another chosen one narrative.
Right. They pitched a protagonist with a distinct magical marking on his forehead. You basically trade a young British wizard's lightning bolt scar for a young, bald martial arts monk named Aang,
who has a glowing blue arrow tattooed on his head.
Exactly. And suddenly you have a network.
It is the classic Trojan horse strategy in media production. You give the network executives the highly familiar, easily marketable packaging they're explicitly at.
The recognizable silhouette of a mystical chosen savior destined to stop a great.
Precisely. But you use that approved standard structure to smuggle in something completely revolutionary.
Yeah.
And according to the analysis in our source material, what they smuggled in inside that Trojan horse was a hidden aging curve.
Okay, a hidden aging curve. Hold on. If Nickelodeon wanted a safe, easily digestible fantasy cash cow, how did the creators get away with secretly aging up the narrative?
Well,
wouldn't a children's network be absolutely terrified of alienating the 10-year-olds watching by making the show too mature too fast?
they would be, which is exactly why it had to be hidden within the pacing of the seasons.
Correct.
The original idea the creators wanted to make was a coming-of-age show, right? So since the network forced them into a high fantasy epic, they essentially embedded the psychological coming-of-age experience into the very genre and tone of the show itself.
That is so smart.
It is. The audience is forced to go through the messy, painful process of growing up with the narrative structure. Let's break down how the video essay maps this out across the show's 3 distinct seasons, which the show refers to as books.
Right. Book 1, Book 2, Book 3.
Exactly. Book 1, titled Water, is fundamentally designed to play like a traditional youthful adventure cartoon.
It's all about discovery.
Exact. We meet the colorful world. We are introduced to the overarching threat of the Fire Nation. We meet fun, localized factions like the Kyoshi Warriors.
Oh, they're great. Which are these incredible fighters dressed in traditional makeup and armor?
Yeah. The tone of this first season is largely playful. It is highly episodic, meaning you can basically tune in on any given week and understand the plot.
Right. You don't need to have seen the last 5 episodes to know what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is accessible. It establishes a necessary baseline of innocence for the main character.
It feels incredibly safe.
Yeah.
You are exploring this beautifully animated new world, meeting quirky characters, riding giant flying 6-legged bison, and like sliding down impromptu mail chutes in ancient cities.
Just classic childhood hijinks.
Yeah, there is this underlying pervasive sense of childhood wonder. You think you know exactly what kind of show you are watching. Then we hit book 2, and looking at the breakdown here, this is where the hidden aging curve violently.
Very violently.
Book 2 completely ditches the lighthearted episodic adventure format and slowly molds to a full-blown serialized political thriller.
The source material specifically labels Book 2 as the collapse.
The collapse, wow.
Yeah. This is where the childhood wonder is stripped away.
Yeah.
The threat is no longer a distant army. It aggressively encroaches on the characters' personal lives.
Everything gets super personal.
Right. Our heroes are pushed to their absolute limits, and they lose practically everything. The narrative pushes toward the darkest midpoint possible. To give some context for those unfamiliar, the heroes spend the entire season trying to reach the Earth Kingdom capital.
Right. A city called Ba Sing Se.
Yes. Think of it as this massive, supposedly impenetrable walled metropolis. It represents their absolute last hope for a safe haven in a world consumed by war.
But when they finally get there, the safety is a complete illusion, right?
It is a devastating subversion. When they arrive, they don't find safe. They find a corrupt, totalitarian secret police force that has brainwashed the citizens into denying the war even exists.
That is so dark for a kid's show.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then the antagonist arrives, a ruthless, hyper-competent teenage firebending prodigy named Azula.
Oh, she is terrifying.
She is.
Yeah.
But Azula doesn't break down the massive walls of Ba Sing Se with raw, overwhelming firepower or giant laser beams.
Right, it's not a DBZ fight.
No. She infiltrates the city, manipulates the secret police, and dismantles the entire government from the inside using pure sociopathic political manipulation.
Jeez.
By the end of the season, the impenetrable city has fallen, the villain essentially wins, and Aang, the chosen one, is critically wounded and for all intents and purposes, gone.
That is heavy. That is an incredibly bleak narrative pivot for a show that, like, a year prior was about riding giant koi fish and getting into wacky hijinks.
It's a mat.
And then book 3, the final season, shifts the genre yet again. It stops being a political thriller and becomes a full-scale war drama.
Yeah, the stakes evolve again.
The characters aren't just reacting to the bad guys anymore. They are orchestrating massive military invasions. They are dealing with the horrific fallout of those invasions failing.
They really are.
They are navigating extremely mature, complex themes of large-scale grief, ethics of war, and the immense crushing burden of having to rebuild a fractured society.
It is the completion of the show's underlying theme. The show itself actually grew up.
Yeah, it matured right alongside the audience.
What's fascinating here is how the creators utilized that specific narrative maturity to generate narrative momentum and excitement.
Instead of just making the bad guys physically bigger.
Exactly. They didn't fall back on the absolute easiest crutch available to action writers, which is simply bumping up the physical power levels of the characters every season.
Right.
By pacing the show structurally like a sweeping traditional movie trilogy.
Yeah.
So, book 1 is the discovery, book 2 is the catastrophic collapse, book 3 is the gritty rebuild. They demanded a genuine intellectual investment from their young audience.
And to put that into perspective, most television shows treat their premise like a sitcom living room.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Think about a classic sitcom. The furniture never moves, no matter how many years pass or what happens to the character. You know exactly where the couch is, you know exactly where the front door is, and the lighting is always exactly the same.
That's comforting.
It is comforting. But this show basically renovated the entire house every single season.
To take your living room analogy a step further, imagine coming back to your favorite sitcom for season 2. And not only is the furniture completely rearranged, but the roof has entirely caved in.
Right, right.
There is a storm raging inside the house, and the characters have to figure out how to survive the element. That is what Book 2 does to the audience's expectation. It forces the viewer to step out of that comfortable, static viewing experience and walk into a much more complex, unforgiving world.
But I keep coming back to the reality of television production. How rare is it for a network or even for a team of writers to actually trust children to process that kind of dramatic shift?
Incredibly rare.
To go from a playful romp to a dark political collapse where the bad guys genuinely win and the world is thrown into totalitarian darkness.
It is a staggeringly bold wager. The conventional wisdom in television, especially animated television, is that kids need repetition, constant reassurance.
Exactly. But that deep, fundamental respect for the audience's intelligence is what forces the storytelling to elevate.
Yeah.
You don't need flashy, cheap gimmicks or bigger explosions when your audience is genuinely intellectually invested in the political and emotional stakes of the world you've built.
And this fierce refusal to follow the standard, repetitive rules of Western cartoon extended far beyond just that hidden aging curve.
Right.
The video essay makes a very compelling case that it completely revolutionized the visual and the cultural language of the animated medium as well.
Which is a perfect segue into a huge point the asks about the visual and cultural. This show refused to just be a standard flat Western cartoon.
Oh, it definitely.
But it also adamant hollow copy of Eastern. Let's look at the animation landscape of the early 2000s. It was incredibly distinct from what was happening.
It was almost entirely segregated in terms of style and philosophy.
Segregated how?
Well, if you look at Western animated shows from that specific era, you rarely, if ever, saw serialized, continuing narratives where a character's actions in episode 3 had permanent, unalterable consequences in episode.
Right, like we were saying, the conflicts were reset every 30 minutes.
Exactly. Furthermore, villains were usually one-dimensional, cackling, villain of the week archetypes with no underlying motivation other than just being evil.
The classic Saturday morning bad guy.
Right. And visually, the camera work was largely static, flat, and purely functional. It was used to capture the gag, but it was rarely used as an actual cinematic tool for distinct visual style or emotional framing.
But then Avatar comes along and introduces this incredibly rich cultural collage.
That's a great term for it.
The video explicitly notes that the show is absolutely inspired by the visual flair of anime. You know, you can see it in the character expressions and the action. But it blends a massive array of real-world global influences to create something entirely.
Yes.
It pulls deeply from the philosophy of Tibetan monks. The water tribes are heavily influenced by indigenous Inuit. Fire Nation draws architectural and militaristic inspiration from Imperial Japan during its expansion period, mixed with a little bit of British and Chinese historical elements.
And the critical distinction the essay makes here is the difference between cultural synthesis and mere cultural borrowing.
Oh, that's an important distinction.
It is a fundamental divergence in creative philosophy that dictates whether a piece of media feels authentic or exploit. Cultural borrowing is lazy. It is simply lifting a surface-level aesthetic.
Just skimming off the top.
Right. In animation, it would be taking the superficial visual trappings of anime. The incredibly big eyes, the spiky, gravity-defying hair, the giant sweat drops on the forehead when a character is embarrassed, and just pasting those visual cues onto a standard, episodic, Western cartoon script.
So just throwing a coat of...
Exactly. But cultural synthesis, which is what Avatar achieved, requires deep, exhaustive work. The show didn't just visually clone anime. The creators translated the underlying structural ideas of the best Eastern media.
The actual mechanics of it.
Right. The long-form serialized drama, the profound philosophical underpinnings of Eastern religion, the highly dynamic, sweeping camera language used in martial arts cinema. And they integrated those core concepts into Western animation to tell a much richer, emotionally resonant story.
That distinction makes perfect sense. It's the difference between a master chef creating a delicate fusion dish that perfectly balances complex flavor profiles from different regions versus someone just aggressively squirting soy sauce onto a stadium hot dog and having the audacity to call it.
That is a remarkably apt analogy.
One requires a deep foundational understanding of the ingredients and how they interact, and the other is just a superficial gimmick to make the hot dog seem trendy.
The soy sauce on a hot dog approach was incredibly common at the time, as Western studios tried to quickly cash in on the growing anime craze.
Oh yeah, we saw so much of that.
But if we consider the broader media landscape of the early 2000s, it was genuinely historically revolutionary to have complex, morally gray, deeply traumatized antagonists in a Western show aimed primarily at a younger audience.
It really was.
It fundamentally proved to the industry that you could translate these highly sophisticated ideas from Eastern media to a Western format without losing the cultural heart of either. In many ways, the source material argues that this specific show paved the way for the much more serialized, narratively complex cinematic animation we casually consume today on streaming platforms.
But of course, embracing that anime style and serialization is a massive double-edged sword. Shows like Dragon Ball Z had already successfully popularized the anime aesthetic and the serialized ongoing storyline in the West long before Avatar premiered.
They certainly did.
But along with that serialization, they also brought over a massive looming structural flaw. A flaw that the creators of Avatar explicitly had to engineer their way out of to survive.
Yes, the looming specter of the dreaded power.
The ultimate trap for any... Let's define this clearly, because the video essay really zeroes in on this concept as the central defining problem of modern long-form fiction.
It really is the core issue.
Power creep is essentially the unavoidable cycle where your characters continuously get more physically powerful over time, simply to keep the audience entertained. Because the hero gets stronger at the end of season 1, the writers are forced to invent a brand new villain for season 2 who is exponentially stronger than the hero's upgraded power.
Otherwise, there is no physical tension.
Exactly. But then, to defeat that new villain, the hero has to undergo more training, unlock a secret potential, and significantly buff their power.
And then what happens to the supporting cast?
Right. The writers have to artificially amp up their power levels so they aren't left behind and rendered useless. And it just cycles and cycles, compounding on itself until, as the source brilliantly describes it, the entire narrative scale becomes utterly absurd. It becomes comic.
The essay uses Dragon Ball Z as the prime, universally understood example of this phenomenon.
Which everyone knows.
Right. However, it makes a very important, nuanced caveat. It is not taking a shot at Dragon Ball Z.
No, of course not.
The essay notes that Dragon Ball Z is built entirely and intentionally around the concept of power scaling.
That's the whole point of it.
Exactly. The entire premise of the show is asking the audience, how impossibly powerful can these specific characters get? Can they blow up a mountain? Can they blow up a planet?
Can they scream loud enough to tear a hole in the fabric of the universe?
Yes. Each narrative arc is purely designed to build up to a massive, unprecedented display of kinetic violence and raw power. And Dragon Ball Z is celebrated because it fully, unapologetically embraces that identity. It never pretends to be a grounded political thriller.
Right. It knows exactly what it is. It is the absolute gold standard for that highly specific type of escalating cosmic spectacle.
It truly is.
But the trap, the real problem, occurs when other properties, completely different types of story, try to emulate that endless escalation and eventually hit a massive narrative brick wall.
And they always do.
They do. The video essay specifically points out that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is currently struggling, in large part, as a direct result of this exact power creep phenomenon.
If you look at the trajectory of a cinematic universe, it perfectly maps onto this flaw.
How so?
Well, you begin with a billionaire building a metal suit in a cave to escape terrorists. The stakes are localized and intensely personal.
Right. Iron Man 1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
10 years later, a purple alien is using magic stones to wipe out half of all biological life in the universe.
Which was awesome at the time, but
once you have saved the universe, where do you go?
you literally can't go higher.
You have to introduce the multiverse and villains who can consume entire timelines. Long-running comic book publishers have been desperately chasing a solution to this scaling problem for decades, often resulting in messy, confusing narrative reboots just to reset the power levels back to zero.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want to ask you about the psychology behind why do writers, knowing that this trap exists and knowing that it ruins franchise, consistently fall into the power creep trap?
Because, fundamentally, it is the most accessible, easily quantified, and visually obvious way to demonstrate progress to an audience.
Just making things bigger.
Right. Writing genuine emotional or psychological growth is incredibly difficult and subtle. But if your character punches a villain through a single brick wall in Season 1, and then punches a new villain through 3 solid steel walls in Season 2, the audience instantly, viscerally understands that the character has grown stronger.
It's an easy metric?
It is a visual, lazy shorthand for character development. And more importantly, it triggers a very quick, very satisfying hit of dopamine in the viewer's brain. We like seeing the big explosion.
But that raises a tough question for us, the people watching. Are we as audiences actually addicted to that specific dopamine?
That's a great question.
Are we the ones demanding the bigger explosions? Think about it. When you buy a ticket to a summer blockbuster sequel, part of your brain absolutely expects the final battle to be louder, longer, and more destructive than the last movie's final battle.
Oh, definitely. If it's smaller, you feel cheated.
Exactly. Are we, the viewers, the fundamental reason writers fall into this trap in the first place? Do we force their hand?
It is undoubtedly a symbiotic cycle. The audience expects a certain level of escalation, so the creators feel financially and creatively obligated to provide it.
Right.
But as the essay astutely points out, this is a fatal trap because of the law of diminishing return. When the narrative stakes become universally high all the time, when every single battle, every single movie is for the fate of the entire universe or the infinite multiverse, those stakes actually become completely emotionally hollow.
Why is that, though? Why does bigger mean hollow?
Because human empathy has a scale limit. If a character is casually destroying planets with a wave of their hand, it becomes impossible for the audience to relate to their struggle on a human interpersonal level.
That makes sense.
We understand the pain of a broken arm or the fear of a burning building. We cannot comprehend the destruction of a galaxy. The scale becomes so immense, so abstract, that it loses all emotional resonance.
It's just lights and noise at that point.
Exactly. The tension completely evaporates because the conflict no longer resembles anything close to the human experience.
That makes perfect sense. So if power creep is this seemingly inevitable gravity-like trap in action-heavy long-form fiction, how in the world did a cartoon about teenagers who have literal superpower, people who can conjure walls of fire, summon tidal waves, shatter mountains with a stomp of their foot, manage to dodge it so quickly?
Well, it is a bit of a magic trick.
It really is. Well, the source material breaks down 2 primary structural solutions of the show, and we need to look at...
The first solution the essay identifies is entirely philosophical. It starts with the foundational morality of the show's universe.
Right. It's a complete paradigm shift away from the traditional Western narrative structure that we are all used to. The essay highlights that the show operates fundamentally on the theme of balance, rather than the strictly binary black and white concept of good.
Now, to be clear, there is undeniably good and evil within the narrative. The Fire Nation's imperialist expansion and genocide are unequivocally framed as evil.
Yeah, they aren't ambiguous about that.
No, not at all. However, the overarching spiritual goal of the character, particularly Aang as the Avatar, is not simply to punch the evil characters until they stop moving.
It'd be the easy way out.
Right. The Avatar's sworn duty is to act as the bridge between the physical and spiritual world, and to restore harmony and balance when systems fail. The philosophy dictates that you cannot destroy an element of the world without throwing everything else into chaos.
And we see this philosophy deeply embedded in very specific critical episodes, rather than just being vague background lore.
Oh, absolutely.
The source points to an incredible episode in Season 2 called The Guru. In any other shonen anime, the hero going to a master to prepare for the final battle would result in a montage of them lifting heavy boulders or learning a devastating super punch.
Training montage, yeah.
But in The Guru, the focus is entirely... Aang has to sit on a mountaintop and focus on spiritual balance. He has to systematically unlock the 7 chakras by confronting his own internal block, grief, fear, his guilt, earthly attachment.
Incredibly deep.
It's an entire episode about emotional processing, not physical training.
It's a staggering subversion of the training montage trope. And the essay also highlights an episode in Season 3 called The Firebending Masters.
Oh, I love that one.
It's so good. Throughout the entire show, fire has been depicted solely as a weapon of hatred, anger, and catastrophic destruction.
It's just burning everything.
Right. But in this episode, the characters are forced to seek out the ancient, original source of firebending, and they learn a profound philosophical truth. Fire is not inherently destructive. Fire is energy. Fire is life. It is the sun.
Which fundamentally redefines what power means within the context of the universe. It's not about who can burn the hottest, it's about who understands the true nature of the element.
Yes.
It allows the show to operate beautifully in restraint. As the essay points out, power creep and endless, mindless scaling become far less important when the audience learns, over the course of 3 seasons, that not everything has to end in a massive display of violence.
Exactly. The narrative trains the audience to look for alternative resolution.
Yes, the obvious ending, the physical beatdown, the villain being destroyed destroyed by a bigger energy beam isn't always the expectation. The video provides some incredibly powerful examples of this concept of the third option.
Katara is a great example here.
Let's look at Katara, the primary waterbender. She is a character who possesses immense, overwhelming power by the third. She goes on a dark, personal mission to track down the specific Fire Nation soldier who murdered her mother when...
Very tense episode.
She finally finds him. She confronts him in the pouring rain. She uses her mastery of waterbending to freeze the very rain into thousands of ice daggers suspended in the air, pointing directly at this pathetic, coward.
She has him completely at her.
The audience expects vengeance. The genre demands vengeance.
But she doesn't take it.
She chooses to spare him. She stops the ice. Not because she forgives him. She explicitly states she doesn't forgive him, but because she refuses to let her immense power turn her into a monster. She exerts restraint.
Such a powerful moment.
Then you have the primary antagonist, Prince Zuko, whose entire arc is a masterclass in this concept. He is constantly teetering on the edge of redemption, failing, falling back into old habits, and trying again.
He has to unlearn so much.
His journey proves to the audience that enemies don't just have to be utterly defeated or killed. They can be profoundly transformed. The entire brutal cycle of revenge and retaliation between the four nations is explicitly painted by the narrative as a toxic, endless trap, not a glorious, heroic crusade.
And this philosophical framework culminates in the most striking, controversial subversion of all, the climax of the entire...
The final battle.
Think about the setup. This is a show that is ostensibly about a 100-year global war involving superpowered Mars. The fate of the entire world is literally burning in the background.
Right.
Yet the ultimate climax, the resolution of the core conflict, is literally about the protagonist, Aang, finding a hidden, ancient, non-violent, spiritual solution to defeat the Fire Lord without having to compromise his pacifist monk upbringing by taking a life.
Wait, I have to push back on that. Because on paper, if you tell a network executive or a typical action fan, hey, we are going to build up this terrifying, world-conquering villain for over 60 episodes, and in the final battle, the hero is just going to choose not to kill him, that sounds like a massive cop-out.
It sounds anticlimactic, yeah.
It sounds like a cheat to keep the show kid-friendly. How does the show actually pull that off without ruining the emotional payoff?
It pulls it off precisely because of the exhaustive groundwork we just discussed.
Yeah.
If the ultimate highest tier of power in this specific universe is actually the strength and the power to walk away, to restrain yourself, then the viewer's entire metric for success changes.
This raises an important question. If power is fundamentally defined by restraint, then true mastery is knowing when not to use your deviant abilities.
Yes, exactly.
And that completely alters the psychology of the viewing experience. You aren't just sitting on your couch passively waiting to see who hits harder,
Right.
or who can generate the physically bigger energy blast.
You're invested differently.
You are actively, anxiously engaged in the internal moral struggle of the character. You are watching Aang dodge blasts of fire, and the tension isn't, can he hit back harder? The tension is, can he survive without breaking his own moral code?
Which, as a writer, takes so much more work.
Oh, I bet.
Think about how radical it is to spend 3 years training a television audience not to expect a giant fatal punch at the end of the final battle. It requires the writers to do an incredible amount of heavy emotional lifting, episode after episode, to ensure that a non-violent choice feels deeply satisfying, rather than feeling like a contrived cop-out.
It has to be earned.
The true underlying power system of the show isn't the elemental magic of bending, it is the sheer force of moral restraint.
Because the audience never knows exactly how a conflict will be resolved, whether it will end in a fight, a retreat, a clever trick, or a moment of empathy. They are never trapped in that exhausting expectation of constantly escalating violence.
That's the beauty of it.
But as brilliant and noble as that moral philosophy is, the essay makes a critical point. It wouldn't work, it would feel completely hollow if it wasn't backed up by the actual hard physical mechanics of the show's magic.
Which brings us to the second major solution the show utilized to defeat power creep.
And that second solution is the meticulously crafted rules of the magic system itself, the bending of the elements, water, earth, fire, and air. The video essay points out that these rules are, by design, literally rigged against power creep from day one.
They really are.
They're structured to keep the combat system completely grounded and prevent the action from ever reaching the absurdity of a Dragon Ball Z or a late-stage Marvel.
Let's talk about those rules because they are fascinating. Unlike soft magic systems and other fantasy properties where a character can simply draw on infinite vague cosmic energy by yelling loudly or believing in themselves, even the most legendary masterful benders in the Avatar universe have incredibly strict, unbreakable physical limitations.
You can't just power through it.
No, the essay lists them clearly. First, they are limited by their own human physical stamina. Bending requires intense martial arts movements. If you get tired, you can't bend. Second, they are limited by their own creativity and understanding of the element. And most importantly, they are strictly limited by their environment.
That environmental limitation is key. A waterbender, no matter how powerful, needs a physical source of water to manipulate. An earthbender needs to be in contact with earth or rock.
Right.
If you put an earthbender in a wooden cage suspended in the air, they are completely powerless. You cannot just magically conjure a planet-destroying attack out of thin air just because you are angry. You are bound by the laws of physics within the universe.
And because of those incredibly strict limitations, characters in this show don't just level up in power like a character in a role-playing video game.
They don't just get an automatic +10 to their attack stat.
Exactly. When characters improve in combat, it is almost entirely because they undergo profound mental shift. Their tangible improvement in fighting is directly, inextricably tied to a deeper, evolving philosophical understanding of themselves and how they interact with the world around them.
The video highlights a spectacular episode called Bitter Work to illustrate this mechanic perfectly.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
In this episode, Aang is trying to learn earth. Now remember, Aang is naturally an airbender. He was raised by monks, and he intimately understands the philosophy of air.
And what is the physical philosophy of airbending?
The martial art it's based on, Bagua, is all about circular. The philosophy is evasion, flow, finding the path of least resistance, and avoiding direct conflict. But earthbending, which is based on the martial art of Hungar, requires the exact opposite mindset.
Right. Earthbending requires strong, deep stance. The philosophy of Earth is to root yourself firmly to the ground, become immovable, and confront the obstacle head-on.
You cannot dodge a rock. You have to break it.
And Aang completely struggles with it. He tries to use his evasive, airy mindset to move a boulder, and it literally doesn't budge.
He gets so frustrated.
He gets incredibly frustrated because he cannot earthbend properly until he fundamentally changes how he thinks about conflict. He has to stop running away from his problems, both physically in the martial art and metaphorically in his role as the avatar, in order to unlock this new elemental ability.
It's a mental block, not a physical one.
Exactly. His progression isn't about doing more push-ups to get bigger muscles so he can lift the rock. It is entirely about psychological growth and confronting his own instinct.
And we see this intense emphasis on technique, observation, and philosophy over raw, unbridled power time and time again with almost every major character.
We really do.
Let's look at Prince Zuko again. He has to fight his sister, Azula, who is a firebending prodigy capable of generating lethal light. Zuko knows he will never be able to physically overpower her or match her raw out.
She's just naturally more powerful.
Yeah, so instead of his mentor, Uncle Iroh, teaching Zuko how to shoot bigger, more explosive lightning, which would just be a standard, boring power upgrade, Iroh teaches Zuko how to redirect lightning.
And the way he learns it is the ultimate example of the cultural synthesis we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Iroh explains that he developed the technique of redirecting lightning by closely studying the fluid, push and pull movements of waterbend, the opposite.
He synthesized the philosophy of water and applied it to fire.
So Zuko learns defensive knowledge to overcome Azula's raw aggression. He learns to let the lethal energy flow through him and channel it out. It relies entirely on a deep understanding of energy, not the brute force generated.
Precise. Then you have a character like Toph, who the video heavily features.
Oh, Toph is amazing.
She is. Toph is a young, blind earthbending math. Because she is blind, she uses earthbending as a seismic sense to see the vibrations in the ground. When she's captured and thrown into a metal box, she's seemingly helpless because she cannot bend metal.
Nobody can bend that.
Right. But then she realizes something profound. She realizes that the refined metal of the box still contains microscopic, unrefined impurities of earth within it.
Because she senses the world differently than it.
Exactly. So she focuses her intent on those microscopic impurities, and she learns how to bend the earth inside the metal, effectively becoming the first metal bender in the history of the world.
It's such a cool...
She didn't break out of the box because she got physically stronger than her captors. She broke out because she got smart. She perceived the physical world on a deeper, more granular structural level than any other earthbender had ever thought to look.
It's brilliant. It's like playing a complex video game where progressing to the next level doesn't just hand you a bigger, louder gun.
Right. It doesn't just up your damage out.
Yeah, it just unlocks a totally new mind-bending way to solve puzzles and interact with the environment. It rewards creativity over aggression. But wait, I want to talk about the dark side of this magic, because we cannot discuss the rules of this universe without talking about the most horrifying concept the show introduced.
Ah, yes. Bloodbending.
Bloodbending. The video essay explicitly frames this as the absolute ultimate test case for everything we've been talking about regarding power. Let's explain what
It's pretty grim.
it really is. Bloodbending is introduced in season 3 as an extremely powerful, frankly, almost unbeatable new ability. It is the dark realization that the human body is mostly composed of water.
Which is medically true, but in this context.
Terrifying, right. Therefore, a sufficiently powerful and desperate waterbender can bypass a person's external defenses and directly manipulate the water inside their internal organs and bloodstream, effectively controlling them like a helpless physical puppet.
It is a terrifying.
It really is. Now, in almost any other shonen anime or any superhero property, discovering a power like this would be the triumphant highlight.
Oh, for sure.
This would be the cool, awesome new power-up that the hero discovers just in time to easily defeat the villain. There would be a soaring musical score, the hero would strike a cool pose, and they would use bloodbending to save the day.
But look at how the creators of Avatar choose to frame it. The video essay specifically notes that bloodbending is immediately met with severe, unyielding narrative and physical limitation. It is not framed as a heroic triumph.
Not at all.
It is framed entirely through the lens of psychological horror and violation.
Katara is forced to learn it against her will by a deeply traumatized older waterbender.
Yes, the show depicts the act of bloodbending as deeply traumatic for the user. It is framed by the narrative as objectively, undeniably morally wrong to strip someone of their bodily autonomy.
And mechanically, there are strict limits, too.
Right, mechanically, to prevent it from breaking the combat system of the show, it is established that it can only be performed during the peak of a full moon when a waterbender's power is at its absolute maximum.
It is such a masterful stroke of writing. The show introduces this immense, game-breaking, ultimate power. It shows the audience the absolute grotesque horror of what that power actually looks like in practice, and then it immediately restricts it and condemns it.
It changes the way you view power.
It makes you, the viewer, actually fear the escalation of power rather than cheering for it with a bucket of popcorn from the couch. You never want to see Katara use that power again because you know what it costs her soul to.
It's a huge burden.
It is the exact polar opposite of power creep. It is a pure, profound understanding of how to use power in a narrative, and more importantly, how to stop that power from cannibalizing and ruining. So what does this all mean for us as consumers today?
It means that by meticulously weaving together all of these disparate elements, the careful, hidden pacing of the aging curve, the respectful and deep cultural synthesis of animation style, the overarching philosophy of moral restraint and balance, and the incredibly strict, grounded physical limitations of its magic, the creators crafted a piece of media that continues to vastly outshine so many of its modern, multi-billion-dollar contemporaries.
It really has aged incredibly well. You can watch it today, and it feels just as tight and purposeful as it did almost 20 years ago.
It's time.
And as the essay points out, it is because the show lovingly crafted a story that respects its audience. It respects our ability to learn, to process deeply complex, conflicting emotions, and to actually grow up alongside.
It doesn't talk down.
It proves, structurally, that raw power is not everything. It proves that learning and changing your mindset is just as valuable, if not significantly more valuable, than winning a fight. And it proves that no matter how dire the binary choice, there is always a third option. You are wise enough and patient enough.
In the end, the video essay makes a beautiful, deeply resonant concluding point. Despite the show being ostensibly an action cartoon about superpowers and big, visually stunning elemental battles, what the audience actually remembers years and years later are the people.
The character moments.
Right. We remember the quiet moments. We remember the journey, and the video appropriately closes with a quote from the show itself, from the beloved character Uncle Iroh, who tells his struggling nephew, "Perfection and power are overrated. I think you are very wise to choose happiness and love."
Man, that hits hard, especially when you consider how much that specific character suffered to learn that lesson.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, in our current era of entertainment that is obsessively, almost pathologically focused on building bigger, faster, stronger cinematic universes, this series, it endured because it realizes a fundamental, undeniable truth of storytelling. Genuine human emotional growth is the most compelling, spectacular special effect you could ever put on a screen. It is a profound, lasting lesson for the entire entertainment industry, if they are willing to listen.
It really is. I feel like every Hollywood writer's room should have to take a master class on this show before they are allowed to draft. We started this deep dive talking about that exhausting, numbing feeling of watching invincible heroes fight literal gods in space. Entire entirely disconnected from anything resembling the human experience.
Right.
But today, looking at the architecture of this show, we've seen how imposing strict, unbreakable limitations actually force the characters and the writers to become smarter, more emotionally balanced, and ultimately infinitely more compelling. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought ponder about. We've seen how limitations create brilliance. It makes you wonder, if you were to intentionally apply if you were to purposefully restrict your endless resources, or perhaps take comfortable go-to methods for solving problems completely off, what kind of creative, brilliant third options might you suddenly discover about yourself?